has resumed its schedule since the September 11th attacks. Once again, this program reminder, 1 hour from now, 7 Eastern, I'll host a CNN investigation and examination of September 11th, the money maze. Till then, I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. CNN's coverage of America's new war continues with Lou Dobbs Moneyline. That begins right now.
This is Lou Dobbs Moneyline for Monday, January 7th. Here now, Lou Dobbs.
Good evening. Tonight, President Bush back in Washington, and he has a heightened focus on the health of the economy in addition to the war against terror. After a 12-day stay at his Texas ranch, the president started his day by meeting with his economic team and Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan. They discussed ways in which to stimulate this economy. Later, talking with reporters, Mr. Bush said he was optimistic that 2002 will be a better year for the economy than last year. The president also said he would continue to press Congress to pass his economic stimulus package when they return from break on January 23rd. John King joins us now from the White House with the story. John?
And Lou, that first meeting of the new year for the president here at the White House, a very high-powered meeting, as you noted. The Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan on hand, Vice President Dick Cheney, 3 members of the Bush cabinet, his entire economic team, the president dealing with both short-term and long-term economic prescriptions here at the White House. One of the new realities is this government is now running deficits. When Mr. Bush came to office, he was running surpluses, and another new reality is it is now a congressional election year, and Democrats say the president is to blame for the fact that the government is back in red ink. One of the president's priorities today was to make the case that, no, that's not true. He's not to blame.
It makes sense to spend money necessary to win the war. It makes sense to spend money necessary to protect the homeland, and we're in a recession. There are some talk about raising taxes. That would be a disaster to raise taxes in the midst of a recession.
Now, that last part from the president, talk of raising taxes, the Democrats object to that. They say no Democrats have proposed actual tax increases, but the Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle last week did say that in his view the Bush tax cut made the recession worse and is responsible for turning the government from surpluses to deficits. So as the president returned to the White House today, yes, he said he hopes to reach an agreement again in the short term on a stimulus package. He's working on a long-term budget and economic plan as well. But you could see the political positioning made now in this congressional election year. The Democrats want to blame the president for the struggling economy. The president says it's because of the war and the recession, and he's almost daring the Democrats to come to the floor of Congress and try to raise taxes. Lou?
John, did Senator Daschle at any time explain how cutting taxes could exacerbate the effect of recession?
He has not quite explained that. The president today said if you asked economists, they would say a tax cut at a time of a recession is the right prescription. What Senator Daschle says is he says the Bush tax cut went too far. He says it's not really even a $1.3 trillion tax cut, as the president said. It's at least $1.6 trillion over 10 years. Some say even more than $2 trillion. Senator Daschle says it was too big, that a more modest tax cut would have left some money here in Washington to deal with emergency spending. This will be the defining debate of the election year. They still want to get about the business of talking about health care, a patient's bill of rights, a prescription drug care benefit. All of it, of course, would have to be paid for. So the big debate over is who is to blame for the surplus. The president says it is a time of war and recession. The Democrats say it was that big tax cut. It's January. The elections are in November.
And the silly season is upon us, despite everything else. John, thanks very much. John King from the White House. Well, the Pentagon is pushing for a large boost in its budget, hoping support for the war against terrorism will translate into support for more money for the Pentagon. President Bush today said protecting the United States is a priority of his next budget. Even with the cost of fighting the war against terrorism estimated at more than $2 billion a month, the Pentagon has much broader plans and needs for that money. Kitty Pilgrim has the report.
The war in Afghanistan has been a unique combat situation and a real lesson. For example, the use of precision-guided missiles was effective. But because the war relied on them as one of the key strategies, 60% of munitions were so-called smart bombs, the arsenals were used up very quickly. At up to $1 million a missile, they are what might be considered a big-ticket item.
We discovered in Afghanistan that smart bombs are a critical point of leverage in modern warfighting. The problem is the Clinton administration didn't buy enough, and we're using them up very quickly. We need to buy more, and we need to buy them quickly.
Most analysts expect the Pentagon to ask for a $20 billion increase for 2003. This is a bit less than the $33 billion, or 7% increase, for 2002. Defense is 5% of GDP. With the war in Afghanistan costing $2 billion a month, the increase doesn't even cover the cost of the conflict.
It's clearly going to be necessary to increase funding for weapons modernization because we just didn't buy much in the 1990s and the equipment's getting too old.
The great worry is preparing for the last war. But now the military finds it must prepare for both current and future conflicts. For example, conventional forces were expected to face budgetary pressure this year. But now, basic military hardware like aircraft carriers, tanks, and tactical fighter jets are likely to get funding. In this war, the importance of long-range bombers was demonstrated. Yet there will also be a push for more money to fight unconventional wars, with increased funding for intelligence, chemical, and biological preparedness. Now, according to the Defense Department, military costs in Afghanistan will not go down anytime soon. What this current war on terrorism has taught military planners is don't count any contingency out when planning for the future. Lou?
Kitty, did I hear the expression war fighting?
War fighting.
That is, Washington can be frightening for lots of reasons, but when they come up with words like war fighting.
Well, it's been an interesting story all day because you hear lingo you just don't generally hear.
And probably most of us would prefer not to hear. It seems like fighting would suffice there, or perhaps even war. But
seems like it. But I think the point is well made.
I will take your word for it. Kitty, thank you very much. U.S. warplanes today carried out concentrated bombing against targets along the Afghan-Pakistan border. Military officials say they're trying to flush out al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters who remain there and are trying now to flee into Pakistan. The aircraft also dropped precision-guided weapons on cave entrances where U.S. Marines found tanks and armored vehicles. For more now on this story, we're joined by senior military affairs correspondent Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon. Jamie?
Well, Lou, they call this another bit of Pentagon parlance. They call it exploiting the territory. U.S. Marines and Special Forces have been gathering up tanks, armored vehicles, artillery pieces, putting them into one location, and then calling in airstrikes from B-1 and B-52 bombers to destroy them. They also found at those locations what we're told was a lot of dead al-Qaeda fighters. But the location of Osama bin Laden and Mullah Omar is as much a mystery as ever, and the Pentagon today vowed to stop speculating where they might be.
We're going to stop chasing, if you will, the shadows of where we thought he was and focus more on, the entire picture of the country, where these pockets of resistance are, what do the anti-Taliban forces need so that we can develop a better intelligence picture.
As the bombing of Afghanistan enters its fourth month, the Pentagon offered these videos recorded by an AC-130 gunship last week as evidence that the war is not over. Pictured here is a large training and supply complex in eastern Afghanistan that was targeted because it was believed Taliban and al-Qaeda forces were gathering there. The Pentagon says it's not sure what those people were doing, except that they were probably trying to seek some safety in numbers. But they say there's still a very dangerous situation, particularly in eastern Afghanistan, which was described today by one of the Pentagon briefers as a hotbed of support for the al-Qaeda and Taliban regime. Lou?
Jamie, thank you very much. Jamie McIntyre from the Pentagon. The first U.S. congressional delegation, including a well-known former prisoner of war, arrived in Afghanistan to assess the results of the American-led military campaign there. Senator John McCain and Connecticut well-known Senator Joseph Lieberman among the senators who arrived at Bagram Air Base under, as you might expect, extremely tight security. The senators met with Afghan leader Hamid Karzai. They said afterwards that the United States must stay engaged in the effort to now rebuild Afghanistan. For more on the story, we're joined by John Voss at Bagram Air Base.
Hello, Lou. Well, those senators were on the ground for barely 4 hours tonight, but they say it was, in fact, a very important meeting with the new interim chairman, Hamid Karzai. Now, one interesting point to note about Hamid Karzai, he had to make the long journey to Bagram Air Base here north of Kabul to meet with the senators. This is, of course, a secure location. Hundreds of U.S. and British troops have been on the ground here for more than a month. Now, that meeting the senators describe as being very crucial, very symbolic, and also very important. They wanted to assess the situation on the ground At that meeting, Hamid Karzai thanked the senators for coming. He also wanted to thank the people of the United States as well as the U.S. government for its continued support in the ongoing struggle against terrorism. It was at that point that one of the senators interrupted, and he apologized to Hamid Karzai for the United States abandoning Afghanistan more than a decade ago. Now, after that meeting, Senator Joseph Lieberman addressed a media conference, and he explained why it was so crucial for the United States to remain engaged in this region.
I think people are proud that we were involved here, understand that we need to be here to protect our own security, and it would be a terrible mistake to walk away.
Now, just a few hours after the senators touched down here at Bagram, another dignitary arrived, British Prime Minister Tony Blair, the first British Prime Minister to ever visit Afghanistan. So a very symbolic night here for the Afghanistan people and for the new chairman, Hamid Karzai. Now, they held private talks, and during those private talks, Hamid Karzai told Tony Blair, in effect, that he was sorry that he could not host Tony Blair in the capital, Kabul. He was sorry that it was still too dangerous to host dignitaries in the capital of this country. Tony Blair's response to that was, unfortunately, these are the circumstances we must deal with. Now, Tony Blair also pledged more security for Afghanistan, a similar message to the one that the senators brought with them tonight, that the world is here to help Afghanistan, to help it rebuild after so many years of war. Lou?
John, thank you very much. John Voss updating us from Bagram Air Base, where 9 U.S. senators and British Prime Minister Tony Blair today arrived for consultation with the provisional government. Well, from the beginning, President Bush has made it clear that the war against terrorism will reach well beyond the borders of Afghanistan. As a result, there is considerable speculation as to which target is next. Richard Pearl, resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and chairman of the Defense Policy Board, says that Iraq and principally Saddam Hussein should be next. Richard Pearl joins us from Washington, D.C. Richard, good to have you with us.
It's great to be here, Lou.
Iraq. You think this is, despite some indication to the contrary, the appropriate next target?
Well, I think it would be an entirely appropriate next target, but if there's one in between, that's probably all right, too. The important point is that ultimately we have to confront Saddam Hussein if we're going to win the war on terror. We can't leave in place a man who has supported terrorist organizations the whole of his life and continues to do so after September 11 and will go on doing so.
But in point of fact, as you well know, Richard, for a decade we have permitted, for all practical purposes, Saddam Hussein to continue in some ways to tweak the noses of the Western powers that sought to redress his aggression in 1991. A number of people say that it is impractical to consider a military operation of the scale of the Persian Gulf War. How do you respond to those people?
Well, I don't believe that it would take a military operation on the scale of the Persian Gulf War. It's an entirely different situation. For one thing, Saddam's military forces are now about a third of what they were at the time of the Persian Gulf War in 1991. And it's the same third. That is, it's the remnant of what he had then, antiquated weapons, old tanks that are sitting ducks for the kind of modern air power that we now possess. And very often the people who find Saddam an intimidating, daunting figure are the same people who said we'd get bogged down in Afghanistan. There are lessons to be learned. Saddam is not 10 feet tall. He's despised within his own country. And if we get behind the internal opposition to Saddam, as we got behind the Northern Alliance, there's a strategy that can be made to work.
And what we have witnessed on the part of the U.S. operation against terrorism in Afghanistan is remarkable. For one thing, the military did not fight the last war, as some feared. They fought this war, and rather effectively. Is it your judgment that we have to be sequential in the targets that we go after, whether that be Somalia or whether that be Saddam Hussein's Iraq?
No, I don't think we have to be sequential. We could take on more than one at a time if we chose to do so. What has changed since 1991, and your correspondent was on to this point earlier, is the extraordinary effectiveness of precision weapons. When you can aim a weapon at a target and have a high probability of destroying that target, it changes the history of warfare, because almost all of the weapons fired in all the wars of history have missed. That was the best we could do in the past. Precision means that a small and efficient force can deliver devastating firepower. We need simply to find the targets, and we have technologies, extraordinary technologies that permit us to do that under all conditions, including at night and bad weather and the like. So forces on the ground, the opponents of Saddam Hussein or others in other countries, combined with American air power, can do remarkable things, as we've seen in Afghanistan. And we need to revise our notion of what we're capable of doing and what our adversaries are capable of resisting.
And that revision well underway after the experience against the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan. At the same time, the world is becoming extraordinarily complex against the backdrop of President Bush's "you're either with us or against us" pronouncements and foreign policy on the issue of terrorism. The fact is that India and Pakistan tonight remain on the verge of war. The Israelis have confiscated, seized a ship with some 50 tons of weapons that reportedly came from Iran on its way to the Palestinians. How is all of this, in your judgment, going to play through?
Well, the world has not become entirely peaceful or entirely to our liking. What I think has happened, and it's fundamental and of great importance, is that the benefits of victory have been demonstrated in Afghanistan. The destruction of the Taliban regime, the decimation of Al-Qaeda, has put the United States and American policies in an entirely different perspective around the world. What we are finding now is that those who wish to be with us, who wish to fight extremism, are greatly encouraged by our victory. I don't know how many people noticed, but the Kuwaiti government just the other day decided not to embrace the form of radical Islamic law that can be such a problem because it is so extreme. And they did that in part because the winning side now is the side of moderation, of anti-terrorism. So I think that the geopolitical momentum that arises out of Afghanistan is something that we need to marshal and make the most of. And we can encourage the Pakistanis and the Indians to resolve their differences, but most of all, the forces of terror are in retreat, and this is enormously encouraging to those who want to stand with us against terrorism.
Richard Pearl, as always, good to have you with us.
Good to be here.
Well, Pentagon spokesman Rear Admiral John Stufflebeam says he has not seen reports that would indicate a specific culprit in the death of Army Special Forces soldier Nathan Chapman. The 31-year-old Chapman was shot to death last Friday during a mission near coast. Some reports suggesting a teenager may have shot him from ambush. Chapman's remains scheduled to return to Seattle, Washington sometime tomorrow. His body arrived at Ramstein Air Base in Germany over the weekend, later transferred to an Army facility at Landstuhl. The Pentagon says a teenage pilot who crashed into a Tampa skyscraper over the weekend was not perceived to be a threat. At one point, the single-engine aircraft came within 100 feet of a runway at MacDill Air Force Base. That's where the U.S. Central Command is headquartered. It oversees, of course, the war in Afghanistan. The Pentagon says there was no way of knowing what the teenager's intentions were while at the wheel of that aircraft. 15-year-old Charles Bishop crashed the small plane into the Bank of America building Saturday, killing himself. He was carrying a note that expressed sympathy for Osama bin Laden. Bishop also claimed he was of Arab descent. Coming up next year, as cleanup teams sort through the remaining rubble at Ground Zero, the government continues to sort out its formula to distribute the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund. Peter Viles will be here to give us an update. Later, trouble loose in technologies, naming a new president and CEO, a former executive of Lucent. And behind those new flashy cars, automakers also unveiling business goals at their Detroit Automobile Show. We'll take a look at some of those flashy new automobiles, and we'll find out how Daimler Chrysler intends to return to profitability.
Coming up, Lou talks to Dieter Zetsche, CEO of Chrysler.
CNN thanks you for making us America's most watched cable news network. This year and every year, you can depend on CNN.
AT&T Broadband.
I believe I should do a weekend of shopping in an hour.
I believe I should surf without tying up the phone.
I believe in anything that makes homework more fun.
More of the internet you want? You better believe it.
I believe in banishing the sounds of dial-up modems forever.
I believe in downloading the top 40.
Well, it's still the top 40.
Dude. Believe in a faster connection. Call AT&T Broadband now for a special offer on AT&T high-speed cable internet service.
I'm Leif Hansen. If you've been in an accident, you know what a hassle it is. That's where we come in. With Leif's, everything becomes very simple. From Salem to Longview, we make house calls. We'll give you an estimate, pick up your car, negotiate your claim, repair your vehicle back to pre-loss condition, and get it back to you, all without costing you extra. You've got my word on it.
Leif's Auto Collision Centers, the finest in collision repair.
This is CNN.
Automakers are busy unveiling new models at the annual automobile show in Detroit amid what has turned out to be a difficult time for some of the car makers. Between recession and vehicle overcapacity worldwide, car makers are facing tough times, but that didn't prevent many of them from unveiling brand new concepts that are more than appealing. Attracting more attention than the flashy cars, however, word that Ford Motor may announce huge job and production cuts later this week. Other news out of Detroit. General Motors says that it is making every effort to avoid bankruptcy for its troubled truck maker, Isuzu. And the Chrysler arm of Daimler Chrysler saying it expects to hold U.S. market share this year and to keep its marketing costs at or below the levels reached in the fourth quarter of last year. Auto sales down for 2001, but still managing to post the second best annual performance ever. Well, Chrysler is using the show to unveil two of its new offerings, its Pacifica sports wagon and a luxury coupe called the Crossfire. Joining me now, the man who runs the operation, the president, CEO of Chrysler, Dieter Zetsche. Good to have you with us, Dieter.
Hello, thank you for having me.
All in all, a tough year, but a year in which you sold a lot of cars. Why is the automobile industry having so much trouble against the backdrop of what looks like terrific volume?
Well, obviously the market is defined by volume on one side, but by the margins per vehicle, the profits you can make on one vehicle on the other side. And combining both, it was certainly not the second best market of this U.S. Automobile side, but the volume were there, there's no doubt.
Well, in talking about costs, some speculation that Chrysler would manage to break even this year. Is that going to be, for 2001, is that going to be the case?
Well, 2001, we had set a target, a range, and we will be within this range at the better end. For 2002, it's not only a speculation, but that's what we announced a year ago that we would go for, break even in 2002, and that's our target, even though, of course, the boundary conditions have worsened since then, but we are committed to go for this target.
Committed to the target, yet Ford and Chrysler both have been far more aggressive in terms of rebates, zero financing, 0% financing, incentives. Why is that?
Well, we think that we have a great product lineup, and that the first thing we want to convince our customers is that they make the right choice by going for our products. Certainly we cannot totally ignore the level of incentives which are spent by our competitors, and we stay competitive in this regard, but the main focus is our great products.
With that focus on the products, and as we are talking, Dieter, some of those products are being shown, being demonstrated there, shown off at the Detroit Auto Show. What is your target? What are you going to be able to do? We understand cutting costs, controlling costs, but what is going to make the difference for Chrysler in particular this year in the market?
Well, I think we have a unique opportunity being part of Daimler Chrysler to, on one side, leverage the tremendous equity of our three great all-American brands, the great talents we're having on styling, which we are famous for, and which I think we have shown with our concept cars this year again, and at the same time using the technology, the quality, performance of our friends from Mercedes to propel Chrysler to new levels of excellence. And that's exactly the route we are going for. And this has already shown results in last year, and this will lead us to further success this year.
Well, we wish you all of the best this year, Dieter. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Coming up next, the first congressional delegation arriving on Afghan soil. We'll have the latest for you from the region, and we'll have the latest for you on the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund. After nearly 4 months, considerable concern about the distribution of that money. We'll tell you why there are problems. And Lucent managing to lure its new president and CEO away from Eastman Kodak. The news, however, doesn't meet with a resounding favor on Wall Street. We'll have that story for you and a lot more. Stay with us.
These people may have little in common, except that they rode through dozens of states for thousands of miles, raising $24 million in one event for the United Way, the most in its history. Another thing they have in common is the company they work for. But the most important thing they have in common is they prove that by working together, ordinary people can do extraordinary things.
You know what it means to be focused, to be persistent, using the best of your abilities to reach your goals. That's why you choose Pacific Life. With the strength of over $340 billion in managed assets and more than 130 years of performance, the Pacific Life family of companies has the financial strategies to take you where you want to go. Rely on the strength of Pacific Life.
Few have seen a dime of the contributions you made to the victims of 9/11. Where is your money? We'll tell you. Plus, many families may eventually walk away millionaires. Is it fair? You decide on a special Wolf Blitzer Reports, 7 Eastern, CNN tonight.
Tonight, CNN takes you live to the front lines of the war on terror. Get the latest on our U.S. troops, the hunt for bin Laden, and the fate of a people caught in the crossfire. Live from Afghanistan, 8 Eastern, only on CNN tonight.
In the war against terrorism, 9 U.S. senators at Bagram Air Base today in Afghanistan, leading the delegation, Senators John McCain and Senator Joseph Lieberman. They met with the new provisional leader of the Afghanistan government and afterwards said the United States must stay engaged in Afghanistan to stamp out terrorism and to help Afghanistan rebuild. Also arriving at Bagram Air Base today, British Prime Minister Tony Blair. The Prime Minister met with Afghan leader Hamid Karzai and British troops stationed at the base and in the area. U.S. warplanes dropping more bombs near the Afghan-Pakistan border where al-Qaeda fighters are believed to remain in hiding. They also targeted a training camp where U.S. Marines recently found tanks and armored vehicles. Now an update on the special government fund for the families of the September 11th victims. When the proposed formula for that fund was announced in late December, some found it generous. On average, awards of $1.5 million per family before deductions for life insurance and pension money. But over recent days, criticism of that fund and its formula have been increasing. Peter Viles is here now and has the story for us. Pete?
Lou, there are a number of new complaints against the formula behind this fund, which governs the distribution of billions of dollars in federal money. One complaint is that many families, notably the families of New York firefighters who died, will not receive anything from the federal fund because they have somewhat generous pensions and death benefits.
All through the holidays, we kept hearing about how families, the average family, was going to get $1.6 million under the fund. But the public didn't hear about how so many families would get nothing.
Another complaint is that the formula devised by Kenneth Feinberg effectively caps earnings at $240,000 a year. Families of victims who earned more than that will be compensated at that level.
This was the World Trade Center, the symbol of the financial capital of our country. And many of our financial leaders were in this building, and future financial leaders. And the way that it caps their earning, their potential award is unfair and needs to be adjusted.
Now, the rules of this fund are not yet final, and the Special Master, Kenneth Feinberg, has been meeting regularly with victims to listen to these complaints, but the complaints are mounting. Lou?
Pete, it is, in nearly every case, a tragedy that families have to go through this. At the same time, it seems to me unseemly and unfortunate that the families of the victims have to step forward and ask, really, is what they're doing, is asking for more money. This fund was set up to prevent lawsuits. Why don't they just sue?
Well, they can sue, but when Congress set up the fund, it took away some of their leverage. It capped the liabilities of the airlines.
If they accept the money.
It capped the liability of the airlines at the amount of insurance the airlines have, period, which cuts down the incentive to sue. And they said, in return, we'll give you this special fund. You don't like the fund, you can sue, but you're going to sue for a limited amount of money.
$1.5 million, $1.6 million, a lot of money, until one starts deducting that from all of the other issues here and elements in it. What is the average family going to receive, the family of a victim of the World Trade Center, whether he or she be a firefighter, a public safety person, or an unfortunate employee within the World Trade Center?
What the 1.6 tells you is you may not get $1.6 million from this federal fund, but if you get less than that from your life insurance, your pension, your death benefits, the federal fund will take you up to 1.6. So these families will be receiving some. It's just that some will get nothing from the fund, everything from pensions, death benefits. And we should say the charity money is not counted against your federal award.
So with $1.6 million from the federal fund, plus the money from the charities, and that looks as though it's going to amount to something in the neighborhood of right around $500,000 per family. We should not be too disappointed in how generously we're treating these families.
They're being treated much more generously than any victims of past disasters or past wars. The complaint, and we hate to say it, it's a complaint, is that they're not being compensated for what they lost. A lot of these were very high earners, and it's unfortunate to have this ugly dispute over it, but you point out this is a very generous settlement in the end.
Okay. Pete, thank you very much. Peter Miles. Well, Peter, of course, will be following this story as he has throughout, and he will have more on the story at the top of the hour with Wolf Blitzer. Lucent Technologies today took another step in the painful restructuring of the company, and today named the now ex-president of Eastman Kodak, Patricia Russo, to be the new president and CEO of Lucent. Investors didn't appear confident that bringing back a veteran Lucent executive will turn the company's fortunes. Lucent stock, in fact, fell more than 2% today. It was the most actively traded issue on the big board. Fred Katayama has the story.
Lucent Technologies went for blue blood instead of new blood after a 16-month search. Patricia Russo spent 8 years at IBM and 20 years at Lucent and its former parent, AT&T. After just 8 months as Eastman Kodak's president, she'll come home to replace Henry Schacht in the corner office.
I bring a set of management skills, and at the same time I bring a familiarity that helps assure continuity, a smooth transition, which, by the way, is important for our customers and I think important for the investment community.
Some analysts had hoped for an outsider, arguing new blood is needed to make big changes. Others say an insider could lift company morale and prevent an executive exodus. She's known to inspire loyalty.
I think Pat's a good choice. I know a number of people who have worked for Pat in the past and really respect her. They say she's a very decisive person.
Lucent investors had mixed feelings, sending the stock up after the open but pushing it down 2% on the day. Eastman Kodak fell more than 3%. Russo knows the company well. Lucent has sold or spun off so many businesses, what's left today is essentially the division Russo ran, the core business selling telecom equipment to big phone companies like AT&T and Bell South. This Lucent shareholder says Russo's experience is all the more important given investor anxiety.
Deb Hopkins came in from Boeing and took 8 months to announce her restructuring plan, and by that time business had turned down very dramatically. So we think someone with experience at the company is the right choice.
For now, Russo says she'll focus on carrying out Schacht's turnaround plan and improving relationships with customers.
She faces many challenges, making good on the company's forecast of breaking even in 2002, filling in some holes in the product lineup,
and getting that stock back up, a stock that peaked at more than $80 a share. And some analysts believe more job cuts may be necessary, but she says she doesn't foresee any cuts for now. Lou?
Well, I think we need to be fair to Ms. Russo. We said that there was no Russo rally.